Thank you for joining me. I'm Barbara O'Neill. Let's talk about something we all do, often without a second thought: freezing bread. It seems simple, doesn't it? Toss it in the freezer, pull it out later. But hold on a minute, because just like so many of God's natural processes, there's a right way and, well, a not so right way to do this. And trust me, those little mistakes you might be making could be impacting not just the taste and texture of your daily bread, but your precious health as well. Now, the freezer is a wonderful tool, isn't it? A modern marvel that helps us extend the goodness of foods like bread, preventing them from going to waste. But freezing isn't just about hitting pause on spoilage. It actually changes the very chemistry of that loaf in ways that can be surprisingly beneficial when done correctly, or, and this is important, quite problematic when we get it wrong. Those seemingly small errors you might be making when freezing bread the wrong way, they can truly compromise your health. But don't you worry, because today I'm going to shine a light on the 7 biggest mistakes I see people making when they freeze their bread, often without even realizing the risks they're taking. And of course, I'll share those essential simple tips to ensure you're freezing this staple food the right way, preserving its goodness and keeping your family safe. Curious to find out if you're making these common errors? Stick with me until the end, because that last mistake on the list, well, it might just shock you. But before we get there, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. Let's spread this important knowledge. And if you're new here and seeking simple, natural ways to care for this incredible body God has given you, then do subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments below, do you enjoy bread every day? What's your favorite kind? And where in this beautiful world are you joining me from? I'd love to hear from you after you've watched. Alright, let's get down to it. Here are the 7 common mistakes people make when freezing bread, and why they truly matter for your health. Mistake number 1: leaving your bread naked in the freezer. Now imagine sending a little one out into the cold without a coat. That's what you're doing to your bread when you toss it in the freezer. Unprotected, it suffers something called freezer burn, and that's just the beginning. Once frozen, that bread starts losing its precious moisture, leading to a dry, crumbly texture that's just not enjoyable. But far more concerning is what else happens to that unprotected loaf. It can actually absorb moisture and even odors from other foods lurking in your freezer. And this creates a perfect breeding ground for invisible fungi to develop. Now, these aren't the friendly kind. These fungi can produce mycotoxins, and while you might not see them, they can cause all sorts of trouble, digestive problems, allergic reactions, and even contribute to that underlying chronic inflammation we're always talking about. So that bread doesn't just become unpleasant, it becomes potentially harmful. The fix? It's so simple. Give your bread the protection it deserves. Use proper freezer packaging, good quality plastic freezer bags, well-sealed plastic wrap, or even aluminum foil. All work well. For the very best results, aim for airtight packaging or use a vacuum system to remove that excess air before sealing. This prevents those damaging ice crystals from forming and keeps the bread's structure intact. Mistake 2: freezing bread while it's still warm. How many of us have pulled a beautiful freshly baked loaf from the oven and, in our haste to preserve it, wrapped it up while it's still warm? It happens especially with those homemade treasures, but this seemingly innocent act can create a real problem. Wrapping warm bread in plastic creates a steamy environment inside that packaging, and that warm, moist air is an open invitation for mold and its little helpers, bacteria, to create a favorable environment for growth. When that warm bread, sealed in plastic wrap, starts to release steam, that moisture has nowhere to go, and all that excess moisture, both from the warmth and the freezing and thawing process, results in a soggy, unappetizing loaf. Not exactly the delightful start to your morning you were hoping for. But the consequences go deeper than just a mushy texture. That warm, saturated environment is a paradise for harmful microorganisms to thrive parasitically on your food. So before you even think about bagging up and freezing your bread, always, always wait until it has completely cooled to room temperature. This one simple step is your guarantee that the bread will maintain its original goodness and won't become a fungal playground. Mistake 3. Freezing the whole loaf. Now, it might seem like the most efficient thing to simply toss that whole loaf into the freezer, especially when you've got a busy household. But let's pause and consider the wisdom in taking a few extra moments to portion it out. You see, bread has a delicate nature, and it truly suffers when subjected to repeated cycles of freezing and thawing. Think about it, when you freeze and then thaw an entire loaf, you're likely not going to consume it all at once. This means that leftover portion will likely sit out, perhaps even at room temperature for a while, before you decide to freeze it again. Each time bread goes through this freeze-thaw cycle, those intricate starch molecules within undergo a process called retrogradation at an accelerated rate. This essentially means the bread begins to lose its inherent moisture, becoming increasingly dry, crumbly, and losing that fresh, delightful flavor we all appreciate. Furthermore, these temperature fluctuations that are inherent in the freeze-thaw process create an environment that's surprisingly welcoming to the growth of bacteria. Even if the initial freezing slowed them down, the thawing provides an opportunity for any dormant microorganisms to revive and potentially multiply. Repeatedly subjecting the bread to these temperature swings only amplifies this risk. The more thoughtful approach is to slice your bread before it even enters the freezer. Then arrange those slices in a single layer on a tray to freeze them individually before transferring them to a freezer-safe bag or container, perhaps with small pieces of parchment paper between them to prevent sticking. This simple act allows you to retrieve only the exact number of slices you need at any given time, leaving the rest of the loaf safely nestled in the frozen state, preserving its quality. It's a way to minimize waste and significantly increase your chances of enjoying that fresh baked taste and texture every time you reach for a slice. Mistake number 4. Allowing time to slip away. While the freezer is a wonderful tool for extending the life of our foods, it's crucial to understand that it doesn't grant them an indefinite lifespan. Even in the seemingly static environment of the freezer, time takes its subtle toll on your bread. If a loaf remains frozen for an extended period, it gradually begins to lose its inherent flavor and even some of its precious nutritional value. The very structure of the starch within the bread continues to undergo slow changes, even in that frigid state. And while the oxidation processes that lead to staleness are significantly slowed down by freezing, they don't come to a complete standstill. Most types of bread will maintain their optimal quality in your freezer for up to around 3 months. Beyond that time frame, you'll likely start to notice a deterioration in texture and taste. Because it's so easy to lose track of how long different items have been residing in the freezer, especially without a clear system, many people unknowingly end up consuming bread that is far past its prime, potentially stale and lacking that fresh appeal. The simple yet effective solution is to diligently label every package of bread with the exact date it was frozen, and then adopt a first-in, first-out system, just as you would with other stored foods. This ensures that you're consistently using the oldest items first, guaranteeing that you're always enjoying your frozen bread within its optimal window of freshness and flavor. A little label can make a big difference. Mistake 5. Employing inappropriate thawing methods. The process of thawing your bread is just as critical as the way you freeze it, and it's an area where many well-intentioned people unknowingly invite trouble. Simply placing a frozen loaf on the countertop at room temperature for hours might seem like the easiest approach, but it can actually create a perfect storm for microbial growth. Think about it, that frozen bread, as it slowly warms at room temperature, passes through what we call the temperature danger zone, that range between 40 degrees Fahrenheit, that's about 4 degrees Celsius, to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 60 degrees Celsius, where bacteria thrive and multiply most rapidly. Leaving your bread in this zone for an extended period provides ample opportunity for any dormant microorganisms present to revive and proliferate to potentially unsafe levels. This can significantly increase the risk of foodborne illness. Fortunately, there are much safer and more effective ways to bring your frozen bread back to its delicious best. Refrigerator thawing. This is the gold standard for safety. By placing your frozen bread in the refrigerator for several hours or overnight, you allow it to thaw slowly and evenly, minimizing the time it spends in that danger zone. This gentle method also helps to retain moisture, resulting in a much better texture. Oven warming. For those who desire a beautifully crisp crust, preheating your oven to around 350 Fahrenheit and baking the frozen bread for just 5 to 10 minutes can work wonders, essentially reviving it to a fresh baked state. Toaster method. Now, for those of you who wisely pre-slice your bread before freezing, the toaster can be a real blessing for a quick and satisfying thaw. When those frozen slices are placed directly into the toaster slots, the heating elements work their magic, rapidly warming the bread from the outside in. This swift application of heat helps to drive off any lingering surface moisture from the freezing process, resulting in a beautifully crisp exterior and a warm, palatable interior. It's a fantastic way to reclaim that delightful crunch and texture, almost as if the bread were freshly toasted. Just be mindful of your toaster settings. You might need to adjust to a slightly higher or longer setting compared to toasting fresh bread to ensure it's heated through without becoming overly browned or dry. This method is particularly well suited for those single servings or when you need a few slices in a hurry. Microwave use with caution. The microwave oven, with its speed and convenience, can be a tempting option for thawing frozen bread. And indeed it can get the job done in a fraction of the time compared to other methods. However, it's crucial to approach microwaving frozen bread with a degree of awareness, as it can sometimes lead to an undesirable change in the bread's texture. The rapid heating action of microwaves can interact with the starch molecules within the bread in a way that results in a somewhat rubbery or even slightly tough consistency. If you choose to use the microwave, the key is to employ very short bursts of heat, typically in the range of 10 to 15 seconds, and to check the bread's texture after each burst. It's often best to flip the slice as well to encourage more even thawing. Due to this potential for textural alteration, microwave bread is generally best consumed immediately after thawing to minimize any further degradation in quality. Consider this method primarily when speed is of the essence and you plan to eat the bread right away, rather than as your preferred method for achieving optimal texture. Choosing the right thawing method is a simple yet powerful way to ensure both the quality and the safety of your frozen bread. Mistake 6. The peril of refreezing previously thawed bread. This is a critical point to understand for the well-being of yourself and your loved ones. Refreezing bread that has already been thawed can introduce distinct and significant risks to your health. When frozen bread begins to thaw, any microorganisms that may have been present, even in small numbers, awaken from their dormant state and start to multiply. Remember, freezing doesn't eliminate these microbes, it merely puts a temporary pause on their growth. Now, when you refreeze that bread, you're essentially trapping that newly increased population of microorganisms, and when the bread thaws for a second time, these larger populations are ready to thrive once again, potentially reaching levels that could cause illness. Repeated cycles of freezing and thawing create an ideal environment for bacterial growth, and some of these bacteria can produce toxins that lead to food poisoning. This risk is particularly heightened for individuals with more vulnerable immune systems, such as the elderly, young children, pregnant women, and those whose health has been compromised by illness. The guiding principle here is clear. Once bread has been thawed, it should be consumed promptly or discarded. Never, under any circumstances, should previously frozen bread be returned to the freezer for later consumption. It's a simple rule that can safeguard your health. Mistake 7. Ignoring the visible warning signs. And finally, we arrive at a mistake that carries potentially serious health consequences: choosing to ignore the telltale signs of mold on your bread. The dangerous misconception that simply slicing off the visible moldy section leaves the rest of the loaf perfectly safe to consume is one that needs to be firmly corrected. This seemingly small act of trying to salvage a bit of bread can actually expose you and your family to harmful substances that can have far-reaching effects on your well-being. Think of the mold you see as the tip of a vast unseen iceberg. That fuzzy growth on the surface is merely the reproductive structure of a complex network of fungal filaments, called hyphae, that have likely already spread throughout the porous structure of the entire loaf. These microscopic threads can extend far beyond what your naked eye can detect, weaving their way through the bread's interior. Even in areas where no obvious mold is visible, the insidious danger lies in the mycotoxins, the toxic chemical compounds produced by these molds. These microscopic poisons can permeate the bread, even if you can't see the mold itself. And here's a crucial point to understand. Alarmingly, many of these mycotoxins are heat stable. This means that the common practices of toasting or heating the bread will not destroy these dangerous substances. You might kill the visible mold, but the toxins will likely remain, ready to wreak havoc on your system. Consuming bread contaminated with mycotoxins can lead to a range of health issues. Some individuals may experience immediate symptoms like nausea, vomiting, and digestive upset. However, chronic exposure to even small amounts of certain mycotoxins has been linked to more serious long-term problems, including immune system suppression and even an increased risk of certain types of cancer. It's a risk that is simply not worth taking, especially when it comes to the health of your family. Therefore, the only responsible, prudent, and unequivocally safe course of action when you observe any sign of mold on your bread, no matter how small or isolated it may seem, is to discard the entire loaf immediately and without hesitation. There is absolutely no safe amount of cutting away, scraping, or toasting that will render the remaining bread safe for ingestion. Consider it contaminated throughout. Protecting your health from these potentially harmful toxins is a non-negotiable rule. When in doubt, throw it out. It's always better to err on the side of caution when it comes to food safety. Now, here's a fascinating tidbit for you. When done correctly, freezing bread doesn't just preserve it, it can actually make it a little bit healthier. When bread is frozen, its starch undergoes that retrogradation process we mentioned earlier, and this transforms some of it into resistant starch. This is a special type of fiber that our small intestine can't fully digest. Instead, it travels to the colon, where our wonderful gut bacteria use it as food, generating compounds that are essential for our digestive health, particularly butyrate. Butyrate is a short-chain fatty acid with important anti-inflammatory properties that contribute to a healthy gut. To really maximize these benefits, choose whole grain bread with a higher fiber content to begin with, and always follow proper freezing and thawing procedures. The combination of whole grains and the resistant starch formed during freezing can create a doubly beneficial effect on your digestive well-being. Understanding what happens to bread at a molecular level truly explains why proper freezing matters. Bread, at its heart, is mostly starch. When it freezes, water molecules form ice crystals that can rupture those starch granules. With proper packaging and freezing techniques, these ice crystals remain small and cause minimal damage. But without protection, large ice crystals form, destroying the bread's structure and giving you that dry, crumbly texture of freezer burn. The science of freezing bread beautifully illustrates a broader point about food preservation. Seemingly simple processes often involve complex chemical changes that affect both the quality and the safety of our food. What might just look like stainless or a change in texture can actually signal chemical transformations that impact nutritional value and, yes, our health. Freezing bread properly isn't complicated once you understand these basic principles: proper cooling, careful packaging, thoughtful portioning, safe thawing, and paying attention to storage times. These simple steps can create not just better tasting bread, but potentially healthier and safer bread for you and your family. So the next time you reach for that loaf to put in the freezer, remember you're not just preventing waste. You're engaging in a process of food transformation. Done correctly, it improves both the longevity and the quality of one of humanity's oldest and most essential foods. Have you ever made any of these common mistakes when freezing bread? Share your experiences in the comments below. We can all learn from each other. And if you found this video helpful and informative, don't keep it to yourself, share it with others who might benefit. Thank you so much for watching. Take wonderful care and keep those choices healthy. So there ends my lecture on which has freed and revolutionized many women and men. Thank you.